try and run a lap of the British coast. It's a journey of about 5,000 miles, and I thought it'd take about 10 months, and that meant running nearly 17 miles a day, every day for 10 months. I thought it would look like this all of the time, and I thought I was basically going on a glorified holiday. Nobody thought that I could do it, and there were a number of pretty justifiable reasons why nobody thought this, but the main one is probably that I wasn't really a very good runner. I had taken up running about 3 years before, and I'd done it on the back of a New Year's resolution. I was living in Sweden at the time, and my cousin had come to stay for New Year. And we'd been drawing up some New Year's resolutions, and I'd put on mine that I was going to run a half marathon, I think mostly just to outdo whatever her resolution was. And I had none of the right kit. I was in Sweden, it was about -10 for that whole winter. But there was something about running that I immediately loved, and it wasn't necessarily the act of going out and running, and I think what I loved about it was it felt almost like a kind of magic. I couldn't run a mile. I literally couldn't run around the block. I was going out for runs in an old sweatshirt, a raincoat, and it was so hard. But then a few weeks after doing it a bit more, I could suddenly run a mile, and it was that way that the impossible became completely possible so tangibly that I fell in love with. But my ambition when it came to running continually seems to outweigh my actual ability or dedication. About a year after I ran that first half marathon, I decided to sign up for a full marathon. The date was about 3 days after I'd handed in my dissertation. I'd done almost no running, and I had existed on energy drinks and pizza for about 3 weeks. I was dressed as a crayon during that marathon, and it was the most painful 5 hours and 23 minutes of my entire life. I cried for a solid 8 miles, and a small child heckled me and called me a crying crayon. And it was definitely a low point. But I, for some reason, didn't take that as a sign to carry on doing any more training. Instead, I decided to think of a bigger thing to do. And I was sitting at my desk one day at work when I decided that I might want to run around the coast. But for some reason, my complete lack of running experience fell by the wayside in the face of how to actually plan this adventure. And I forgot all about it. I'd never been on a big adventure before. I'd spent a fair amount of time outdoors. My dad likes to climb mountains, and because he had to look after me, he dragged me up with him. This is me at the top of a mountain when I was about 6. I immediately after this wet myself, fell down the mountain, and had to be carried in my dad's waterproof trousers. But clearly this was enough to spark a passion for the great outdoors. I had no idea how to plan this adventure though. So the first thing I did was I bought a notebook, because that seemed like stationery would solve all my inexperience. And I found that notebook just after I came back, and it had 3 lines of writing in it, which probably tells you everything you need to know about how I planned my adventure. I started to tell some people, and like I said, I think most of my friends and family thought this was absolutely absurd. But I also emailed Anna, who you just spoke to, and she immediately replied and said, yes, go and run a lap of the British coast. And she didn't seem to care that I couldn't really run very far, so I took that as a great vote of confidence. She did tell me that it might be worth planning my route though. I didn't again know what this meant, so I went onto paint and I drew this line around a map of the British coast. And then I posted it on Facebook, just so that I could tell people. And as you can imagine, this wasn't very helpful in navigating my way around the coast. But I think something I'm always wary of is that you do so much planning that you never actually do your adventure. And I always like to tell people when they ask about planning an adventure, because I don't have much else to tell them, that you just need to do enough planning to A, get you to the start line, and B, keep you alive. Now, spoiler, I am still alive, and I did make it to that start line, so I'm saying that by my own rules, I planned my adventure perfectly. I started the trip on November the 1st, 2015, right in time for a British winter. I started in Greenwich, and the plan was to run out along the Thames east and then head clockwise around the country, staying south for the winter and then heading north into Scotland for the summer. We started in Greenwich, and it was one of the foggiest days I can ever remember. Nobody could find each other at the start line, and when we were running along the Thames, there were lots of shopping trolleys bobbing along in the river. It was all very scenic. And we ran out to Dartford, and you've obviously just heard from Anna and Jamie, who ran in all these amazing exotic locations. Dartford Dartford is not one of those places. It was one of the most unglamorous places you could possibly start an adventure. I finished day one, I'd run 17 miles, and most of the people here came to run with me, and we went to Wetherspoons for a celebratory horrible lunch. And then I went to stay at the Dartford Holiday Inn with my parents, and it all felt totally unadventurous. And day two comes around, and my legs were aching. I had the beginnings of some chafing from my backpack, which until the day before I had never ran with, although little did I know that was only the beginning. And I suddenly dawned on me, I'd run 17 miles the day before, and that felt like quite a long way to run. Like 17 miles is a long way. And I thought, I've got 4,983 miles to go. And it just felt absolutely absurd. So I did what any sensible person does, and I threw a tantrum in Dartford train station car park, and I cried, and I shouted at my dad. And then I stomped across the car park a bit, went through some stinging nettles, and considered just jacking it all in at that point. But I thought it would be a bit embarrassing. And what I think I forgot in that moment is that when I decided to do this trip, it wasn't because I thought I was a great runner or like uniquely athletic. And I actually think the fact I've done this trip gives people really the wrong idea about my athletic abilities. I was doing the Snowdonia Marathon last year after I got back, and someone stopped me at mile 20 and was just like, I thought you'd be a bit faster than this. But the reason I thought I could do it is because I genuinely believe that anybody could physically do what I did. I was watching all these people having big adventures, and I was wishing I was doing it, and then I realised they were just another person. And just because I hadn't done it before didn't mean I couldn't do it. At some point when I was planning this trip, I saw this quote on Twitter, and it was, "You are under no obligation to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago." And that really stuck out to me. No, I hadn't run around a country before, but neither has anybody until they've done it. There are no shortcuts to running around a country, and not my favourite thing about myself, but I'm a serial procrastinator. If you can take a shortcut and do it at the last minute, I will. And I think something that I liked about this trip was there were no shortcuts. You either had to do it or you hadn't done it. As much as my friends all like to pretend that I got the bus around. So I decided that I'd better at least give it a go. So I set off from Dartford after I'd had my tantrum, and I ran to Gravesend, another exotic location. And from there I had a detour into Maidstone to pick up my sleeping bag that I'd failed to order in time. And I carried on around the Kent coast and then round to Cornwall and up the west coast. And what people like to ask about a lot is being a woman in the great outdoors and how terrifying that is. But something I always tried to think about was the difference between real versus perceived danger. Statistically, I'm so much more likely to come to some sort of gruesome end walking back to my flat late at night in London than I ever am on a deserted trail somewhere. And I stayed with a paramedic who really backed this up for me. And he told me that, again, statistically, you're so much more likely to be hurt by somebody you know. And actually, one of the biggest threats in my life, statistically, is my dad. So by going away for 10 months and hanging out with complete strangers and seeing nobody I knew, I was actually much, much safer. But there are obviously things to actually be scared about. There are real dangers in the world. For instance, in the past 15 years, 74 people have been killed by cows. And before I set off, I didn't realise quite how petrified I was of all animals. But this fear of cows just kept growing and growing, and I was taking stupid detours. I'd be doing 3 miles where I could have done half a mile because I wouldn't want to go around a field with cows. But they say that fear comes from a lack of understanding, so I took to Google and tried to work out what to do if any of these terrifying creatures came into my path. And the story about rams is the one that's my favourite. So apparently, if you've ever seen a ram, it's a pretty hefty creature. And apparently, if a ram is charging at you, you should look it in the eyes, grab it by the horns and spin it around. Now, they are quite large, and you don't just do that once. Apparently you're going to have to do that up to 50 times before this ram gets tired and backs off. And I became so petrified then, not of the rams themselves, but of the thought of having to swing one around. I'm a grown up, I have no upper body strength, so I can't swing around once. And I was on the Isle of Arran. If you've ever been to the Arran, it's pretty remote. And I'd stayed at a hostel one night, and I'd met, there was a series of couples, and they were walking together, they were in their 70s, and I'd been making out as a big, bold adventurer. And the next day, I set off a little bit before them, and I am running along the coast path on Arran, and I come across a ram, and I'm like, oh no, I cannot swing this ram. So I do, and if you've ever been to Arran, you'll know there's not many ways on and off of the coast path, and I thought the only solution to this is I'm going to have to run 2 miles back to where the road intersects this coast path, and then take the road around it. I did think about swimming past the ram, but I didn't know if they could swim. So I start going back, and I bump into these couples, and they're like, you're going the wrong way. You said you were heading around Arran this way. And then I had to tell them about the rams, and obviously then I didn't seem very adventurous, and I definitely lost some adventure kudos. But these couples did escort me through the ram. It unsurprisingly didn't attack me, and I didn't have to swing the ram. But farmyard animals aside, there were so many amazing things about running around the coast. And I think one of the main ones were all the people I met. It was one of the most unexpected parts of it. When I set off, I had all my kit on my back, including a little tent. And I thought I would be camping almost every night, mostly because I couldn't afford to do anything else. But as the journey went around, I ended up spending the night with over 200 complete strangers from the internet, way less dodgy than it sounds. And it was amazing. I had these 24-hour snapshots into people's lives. I was going to choir practices, and I can't clap in time, so that was awkward. And I was reading bedtime stories to people's children. I managed to take a lot of selfies with people's pets on rest days. And it was just really an incredible insight into so many different people's lives. But there were also, of course, hard days. It rained a lot over the winter. I was running for 301 days in the end, running up to 40 miles a day. I had wet feet almost constantly, which was the hardest part for me. And my socks occasionally looked like this, and I did have to put that back on, which was quite challenging. And it got pretty exhausting, to be honest. And there was a time that sticks out as being really hard. I had gone home for the week, and I went home twice during the whole trip. And I'd left off in Swansea, and I was getting the train back to Swansea to pick up the trail again. And I got on the train, and I'd already ran over 1,000 miles at this point. I thought, that's a really long way. And to most people in the world, a long distance is just a long distance. It doesn't really matter if it's 500, 1,000, 5,000 miles. And I thought, why didn't I just pick something a bit shorter? Why did I set out on this ridiculous adventure? And I was on the train back to Swansea, and there was nothing I wanted to do less than start running again. And I was crying, and people obviously thought something awful had happened, somebody had died, and they kept asking me what was wrong, and I kept saying, I've got to go for a run, and I wasn't getting any sympathy whatsoever from the people on the train. And it was at that point that I implemented the 2-week rule. And the 2-week rule was that if from any given point I was having an absolutely miserable time, if in 2 weeks' time I was still feeling the same, I was allowed to quit and go home and call it a day. But if in that 2 weeks something good happened, I had to start that 2 weeks again. And the reason for that is it was meant to be fun. Adventures, on the whole, are pretty self-indulgent. I was raising money for charity, but I could have done that in another way. The point of doing it was that I wanted to do it. I wanted to have this amazing experience. And if I wasn't enjoying it, then there was really no point to doing it. So I made my way around the coast doing this on this 2-week cycle, and always something good would happen with those 2 weeks, and I'd have to start the clock again. And I also used to play the Be Glad game, which is a bit cheesy, but I just on any day had to think of 5 different things to be glad about. And they could be big things, like my feet were dry today, down to little things, like I just ate a great slice of cake. And there was always something to be glad about, because sometimes it was that trip that I'd anticipated, it was that amazing holiday around the coast. My dad came to visit at least once a month, I couldn't get rid of him, and we ate a lot of ice cream, and it got so hot at some points. Everyone told me and always says about how Scotland must have rained loads. I had this insane heat wave in Scotland, so my feet ended up looking like this. It was a horrific tan line I still haven't quite shed. And eventually I reached that finish line, and when I got there, the last day I was running back in along the Thames, back the way I came, so people came out to run with me, and we got to Greenwich Park. It was a lovely, beautiful, sunny day, and I think somebody had told some other people in the park to cheer me in when I came. And I get in, and it was all a bit noisy, and I ran into this group of people, and I was like, great, I finished. I looked around, I was like, my mum isn't here, where is anybody? And it turned out I ran into a group of total utter strangers. And somebody had actually probably put the finish line on top of a hill in Greenwich Park. So I then had to run up the hill to the finish line. And it was weird, it was this beautiful day, and so many of the people I'd missed when I was running were there. But it all felt a bit anticlimactic, really, because I think I'd had so many of these amazing euphoric moments going around the coast. And then the finish line just didn't really feel like I expected it to be honest. And it wasn't until afterwards, the main thing I'd taken from that journey was just not quitting on myself. I wanted to quit so much, and it felt so hard at times. But I just tried to keep on going, and I think the reason that finish line felt anticlimactic is because I'd been doing that the whole way round, and it was never really about running a long way. It was about having a great time, having this amazing adventure. And when I got there, it was just a kind of contentment. It was like, I finished now, I get to stop running. And the main thing I learned on the entire coast is that no matter how hard it is, no matter how much you want to stop, there's always another slice of cake that you can eat. Thank you.